the stronger you feel called to serve others, to make the world a better place, the more likely you are to suffer from feeling overwhelmed. And maybe it shouldn't work that way, and it doesn't have to. What we're going to talk about today is overcoming overwhelm, particularly for change agents, for those of us who really feel called strongly to serve other people. We so often fall into this feeling of just feeling like there's so much coming at us. We're not even sure how to move forward. And so we're going to be talking about how to find what you could call your pace of grace and what that phrase even means. This is a graphic that some of you may already know. We talk a lot about this idea that we get in our own way as change agents. You could think of them as like obstructing angels, meaning that these 6 states of mind get in our way. They're trying to protect us, to keep us safe. But in doing that, they also stop us from moving forward as fully as we can. And at the heart of this whole dynamic is this idea that fear is powering a lot of what we do. And the whole journey of joyful impact is about switching the engine that helps you answer your call from one that is fear-based to one that is based in joy. Today, in particular, we're going to be talking about exhaustion and overwhelm and what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. How do you overcome overwhelm? First question to ask is, how often are you actually running in the red zone, right? We all know when you've ever driven a car where suddenly you stomp on the gas and you see that rev into the red zone, you hear the engine straining. But so many of us as mission-driven change agents, we just run in this red zone continuously. So much so that we don't even know what it looks like to shift gears and to find our pace of grace, something that's more sustainable for us. And, there are a bunch of reasons why we get caught in this pattern. And one of the ways to really get insight into this is to go back to the foundational ideas of cognitive behavioral therapy, this idea that our state of mind at any given time is determined by 3 things: our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And the overwhelm loop is when we kind of play a problem in a loop. And so our thoughts and our feelings are looping continuously. It's very easy to get stuck in a loop of anger and sadness. So, and this is particularly an issue when you have a calling. You are looking at a problem out in the world, sometimes many problems out in the world. There is so much systemically wrong with the world in which we live. And so it's very easy to see these problems and you feel called to answer them. You get angry about the problem. But the problem is systemic. It's bigger than you are. So it's very easy then to feel sad and then to feel like, wow, nothing I do is going to make a difference. You get angry about that. Then you feel sad. You just loop between these thoughts of, I don't even know where to start, and feeling angry, sad, whatever way it manifests for you. When you feel overwhelmed, very often what's happening is you're getting stuck in a loop between your thoughts and your feelings. And notice what's not going on. You're not engaging in action. And that actually really defines overwhelm, right? When we get so overloaded that we actually stop taking action. We're not taking action as positively as we can. Now, a lot of us experience overwhelm. It's not that we're moving so much. We're taking so much action that we find that overwhelming as well. So it's not the idea that you are not doing anything. But chances are when you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't feel like your actions are actually contributing to a solution. And you're just looping in a way that feels very stuck. And so the way to break that overwhelm loop, the good news is you can break it at any one of these 3 points. If you change what you're thinking, if you change what you're feeling, or if you change what you're doing, you can break out of that loop. Very often the easiest way, and cognitive behavioral therapy teaches this all the time, is actually to focus on your thoughts and your actions. Because when we focus on our feelings, we don't have a lot of purchase. We don't know how to change our feelings. We often associate our feelings with external circumstances that we don't even control. But we do know how to change what we're thinking and also what we're doing. And if we change either one of those things, we can break out of that loop and start to feel like we're making more progress. And that's really fundamental to getting out of that sense of overwhelm. So we're going to talk about this idea of a pace of grace. And, the first thing to say is that your calling is a beautiful thing. It's what, is a huge part of your identity in many ways. But it also, as we've said, elevates your risk for feeling overwhelmed. And one of the reasons for this is that your calling, chances are, is unrelenting. If you feel it strongly, you can't run from it, you can't hide from it, if you do step back, it's pulling at you. You feel out of alignment. You feel like, I'm not where I need to be. Some of us have a religious connection or a feeling of faith that connects our calling. That's true for me, but it doesn't have to be connected to any particular religious sentiment. It's, if you feel this calling. And that's, again, why we focus this whole series on people who feel that calling, because the conventional world of self-development doesn't always speak directly to those of us who already feel such a strong call. So finding your personal pace of grace is fundamental. It's vital, because you really need to, you're going to feel this call your whole life. And you need to find a pace of grace, a way of engaging. It's the just right intensity of answering your call, of taking action in pursuit of your calling, that actually over the course of your lifetime maximizes not only your impact on making the world a better place, but also your personal joy and fulfillment. So if you think about that, if you're always pushing in the red zone, you're actually exceeding your pace of grace. And it's very hard to accept this a lot of times for us as change agents. We think that if we put it in the red zone, we must be having more impact. Folks, I can tell you from having coached dozens of people who are in this circumstance, who are strong leaders pushing forward for a call, when you are in that red zone, you're actually compromising your effectiveness and your impact. You may be able to put on that burst of speed in the short run, but it's not sustainable. And it also is actually very often your output, what you're really producing, is less than your best. So I don't want to take away from the sense of urgency that you have in answering that call, but what we want to do when we find that pace of grace is to figure out how to answer the call with joy and with impact. And it's going to vary. Your pace that you can sustain, that's sort of that optimum pace, is going to vary across different points of your life. And so over the course of your life, if you think about it, if you really landed it perfectly in your pace of grace, none of us will, but throughout the whole course of your life, you would have had the maximum amount of impact and joy you could over the course of your life. And our fundamental claim here is that when you feel that calling, answering it with joy is actually fundamental to maximizing your impact. And that's actually a controversial statement. Many of you have a belief that it has to be hard and that you have to be suffering in order to really be doing your utmost to answer the call. I'm not here to tell you that that belief is wrong. Maybe that is truly what's true for you. But in my own experience and working with many people, what we're finding is actually the opposite, that stepping up your joy unlocks an incredible next level of impact for you. So, in a world that's on fire with all kinds of hurt and injustice, change agents, we tend to get overwhelmed by over-indexing on the problem itself and also on our peer community. And then we underinvest in our personal development and in just making practical progress. And so these are some ideas that we want to pursue as we really think about practically, what do you do to overcome your overwhelm? Well, this phrase, if you've ever taken high school chemistry, titrating a solution, adding just enough until it shifts, you want to titrate the trauma. Because as a change agent, whatever the problems are, the inequities, the suffering that you care about in the world, chances are, unfortunately, it's all around you. And, this is a really challenging thing, but figuring out what is the level of sort of taking that in, a focus on the problem that inspires my passion, that sort of maximizes my capability to act. So we have to be open. We have to see things as they are. We have to see the systems that we need to change. But it's very easy to get caught in that loop where we focus so much on the problem that it actually saps us of energy, and it actually takes away from our ability to take action. And that's going to be different for every person. And particularly along lines of race and identity, that's going to be different. But you want to really pay attention when you start focusing on the problem. Where's the point at which you start to feel your energy stepping back and it's too much? And think about it in that way. Practical progress is paramount. A little bit of clarity and planning goes a long way here. A lot of times I see people who get overwhelmed, not because they're not busy, because they're busy all the time, but because they're not focusing on the stuff that really they, in their heart of hearts, know is going to be most powerful in moving things forward. And that's often because we're fearful. And so unpacking that, giving yourself the gift of even just 5 minutes a week of thinking about your plans and your priorities for that week, or just even asking yourself some questions in your head every morning. not even writing it down, just focusing for those little tiny moments. And then if you feel called to go faster, if you feel the sense of urgency, if you're feeling guilty even that you're not doing more, treat yourself like an endurance athlete. Remember that for you as a change agent, your personal care and your personal development fundamentally determine the pace at which you can proceed. And so I find so many folks, actually their pace of grace is not very fast because they've so underinvested in their own self-care. And the calling feels super strong, but the actual capacity to answer it in a joyful and impactful way is much less than it could be because folks haven't built enough self-care into their and personal development into their own routine. And that, again, that feels so counterintuitive. That can be so hard for us when we just want to go after the problem, to actually step back and build ourselves up in order to have more capacity to do it. Comparisons are counterproductive. It is so tempting to think about your peers. Well, so-and-so is doing this, or they do this much work a week, or, I know that they're getting up at 7 in the morning and banging out all this stuff. And the minute you start comparing yourself to someone else, you're already robbing yourself of your own energy. It's your pace of grace. It's uniquely about you and where you are in your own journey at this moment, at this point in your life. It's nobody else's pace of grace. And what someone else is doing, it may inspire you. I mean, look to others for inspiration, but not as a comparison point to sort of try to inspire yourself by guilt or making yourself feel like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Inspiration, but not as a comparison point. It just becomes counterproductive. And then lastly, just experiment, evaluate, appreciate. Finding your pace of grace is going to be a process for you. You're going to have to try some stuff, and you're going to have to recognize some things don't work, and just appreciate that this is a ultra marathon, not even a marathon. This is something you want to sustain for your whole life. That's actually how you're going to maximize your cumulative impact over the course of your life, chances are, is showing up every day. And so figuring out what you need to do that is really vital. So one way to kind of gather all this up is to think about this idea of 5 to thrive, meaning a toolkit that you can rely on, that will be available for you anytime you need it. And the great place to start there is to think about what's actually already working for you when it comes to managing your overwhelm. And when you start feeling overwhelmed, what are some things that you can do that address the issue? So I'm going to just share some ideas that work for me, that work for folks that I've coached. And from this, I hope it inspires you to think about your own list and really picking from that just a toolkit that can be at your fingertips. First one, getting some work done, not all your work. Too many of us have a rule that, I'm going to feel overwhelmed unless all of my work is done. Well, when you have a calling like this, your work is never done. And so you're just sentencing yourself to overwhelm if you have a rule like that. But taking positive action to get something done can actually be one of the very first go-to strategies. But of course, sometimes when you wake up in the middle of the night, the answer is not to start working, right? So you need other tools in your toolkit too. This is key, focusing on your fundamentals, nutrition, sleep, and exercise. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but dialing these in and getting these right is just fundamental to good health across the board, but particularly stress and overwhelm. These are some of the best antidotes out there. An extra hour of sleep can seem very hard to get if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're anxious, if you're waking up in the middle of the night. So sometimes you don't want to get overwhelmed by your own situation. Wherever you are with your fundamentals, don't let that overwhelm you, but focus on making small incremental gains in whatever one of those areas it seems most pressing for you, most valuable for you. Self-talk. Remember that graphic, thoughts, feelings, and actions. Well, self-talk is really a way of questioning your own thoughts. And particularly when your thoughts are overwhelming, you can ask yourself, is that really true? How do I know that's true? What if that wasn't true? There are lots of variants on this from cognitive behavioral therapy and many other systems, the tools, other books out there. Questioning your thoughts can be extremely powerful as a way to overcome overwhelm. Enlist allies. Think about how you can get help. Very often when we feel overwhelmed, we almost get tunnel vision and we lose sight of the people who are around us, who are not just ready to help, but actually willing, who maybe feel a call or feel a connection to you. And just expanding the unit, looking outside of yourself for help can be a key strategy that's too easy to overlook. daily or weekly planning and prioritization. You knew I was going to say this, right? A lot of us really resist this. For years and years and years, I did not like to do this. I like to, sort of follow my instincts. But too often I found myself ending up in my email inbox trying to figure out what to do. And that's really a reactive place. It's not a place of real clear planning and prioritization. So overwhelm, very often, going back to those 6 destructive or obstructing angels, confusion is at the top. And if we don't have clarity, it's very hard to proceed. At some point, we're going to get overwhelmed because we're not clear on what's the 1 or 2 things, the things that are really the highest priorities, that I can focus on those and get those done. So when you go back to doing some work, if that some work is on your highest priorities, the things that really move the needle, then whatever time you have, you're taking positive progress forward. And by the way, that daily, weekly planning prioritization can be minuscule. We're talking about literally a minute or 2 each morning, or 5 minutes in the course of a week. If you can just build up a practice of doing that, it's a gift to yourself that is truly powerful in helping you overcome overwhelm. Another one, Brendon Burchard talks a lot about this, and I really love it. It's the idea that when you feel that urge to consume something, and it's usually, when we're overwhelmed, we're exhausted, we're trying to soothe ourselves. It's perfectly fine. I mean, if that's we all need to relax at some point. But I've found, and this is something that I've learned from Brendon Burchard, a lot of times you may be creating less and consuming more. And so if you can shift the balance, even in a slight way, to incorporate creativity and creating something to share with others, it can have an incredible impact on your sense of well-being. Just that small shift, whatever that is for you, and then incorporating that into your routine to make sure that you're actually creating something and sharing it with others. It's a powerful antidote to overwhelm. And again, it might seem like that I'm asking you to do something additional, but a big part of this is just figuring out, look, we all only have 24 hours a day, and you should be spending a lot of that time sleeping. And so what you choose to do with the time you have really is fundamental to how you're going to feel about it, and how overwhelmed or excited and energized you're going to feel. Meditation, breath work, and other mindfulness practices. We've talked about this a lot. There's just a lot here. You can interrupt yourself with breathing. Your breath is one of the only system in your nervous system that runs automatically, but also through conscious control. So most of us cannot control our heart rate, for example. It just runs unconsciously. But if you stop thinking about your breathing, you're still going to breathe. But you can actually consciously slow your breath down, do different breathing techniques, and that in turn has a dramatic impact on your nervous system and the way you're feeling as a whole. And then, a lot of us struggle with this feeling of like we don't have enough time. One indicator that we are overwhelmed is the quality and the time that we have with our families, our friends, our loved ones is not what it should be. We know it and they know it. And that's often, when we're running in the red zone, that happens a lot. So instead of thinking of like work-life balance, right? And that somehow you should be spending equal time, stop thinking about it as a balance point and think about trying to spot the highest quality moments that you can and elevate your presence in those moments with your friends and your family, because regular high quality presence very often is even more important than the quantity of your presence. And so if the time with your family or your friends is going to be limited to some degree by your answering your call to make a difference out in the world, focus on the quality of that time and the making sure that your loved ones see you that you show up in some regular way for them, because again, those are relationships that you can't neglect. In the one thing, Gary Keller talks a lot about this idea of periodicity, right? That relationships require regular contact. There are things you can do in your calling that you can set aside for a period of time and they won't suffer. You can't set people aside that way. And so even if you can't spend as much time as you might ideally like, focusing on doing it, with some regularity and with high intensity can really be a game changer. So your 5 to thrive, figure out what they are for you. It may be some from this list. You may have other ideas. But figure out a toolkit that's available to you at any time. So if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're feeling overwhelmed, you have something to work with. If you are in the middle of a meeting and you suddenly feel overwhelmed, you can do something else. If you are able to get out and exercise, you can do that at a different time. You want to have go-to strategies that you can use anytime you need them. And the last idea just comes back to something we talk about a lot, the 7 pillars of personal development for change agents. All this stuff is connected. And if you want to answer your calling with joy in a long-term sustainable way, then making small little adjustments across all these areas, it all links together, and it really then allows you to find that pace of grace so that don't get overwhelmed by feeling overwhelmed. Making just small little changes can really help you dial in on your pace of grace. If you like this video and you want to access the worksheet or any other material that goes with it, just click the link below or head on over to joyfulimpact.co. That's the website where we have all the material we use for working with coaching and personal development for change agents. You can set up a free account in the members area, and you can also check out the blog where we have new content coming out all the time. Why are we putting all this out there for free? Because the world has never been more in need of a new greatest generation of change agents. I hope this material is helpful to you, and if it is, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That will help us spread the word.